It's a pleasure to be here in Toronto. Their Air North just had started a flight from, I know, woohoo! So thank you to Air North because they're now flying from Whitehorse to Yellowknife to Toronto, and I was scheduled to be on that flight, but unfortunately always things come up and in the way, but it reminds me about how connected we're getting. Can I just start? I just want to get a show of hands. How many folks here are from the territories? Just stick up your hand if you're from the territories. And how many folks are from outside, or sorry, from not the territories? Welcome, welcome. So a little less than half, great. And just another show of hands, just so I get a sense of who we've got in the room. How many of us are government folk? And how many are not? There you go, a little more than half. Okay. Well, look, I wanted to begin. I was in a conversation this morning with Minister Wozniak, and we were talking about the North, and really, I think of it as the Norths. For those of you who aren't from the territories, it's not the same all the way across. It's quite different. But we have a lot of things in common. We certainly love working together because we understand some of the challenges. But I'm going straight from here up to Old Crow for meetings with all First Nation governments in the Yukon. And I would never talk about Whitehorse as being the North when I go to Old Crow. I would be, well, laughed out of the room. So it really makes a difference. Yet if I'm here in Toronto and I was talking about Timmins or North Bay, we would think of it as the North. So it's a relative term, and I just wanted to help everyone to understand that the three territories are different historically, geographically, in terms of Indigenous peoples. It's all quite different. I wanted to say that right now in the Yukon, we are super active with mining. There's a lot going on. So, and as with places, well, and earlier today in the introduction, I heard that the territories are 33 or 1/3 of the country, but I think it's 40%. It's a big chunk, but it's not a lot of population. And so when a big mine comes in or goes out, that makes a big difference to us. And so we can get these cycles. But right now, I think we're on a very strong cycle. And I just wanted to share one small story that as we went through COVID, and this PDAC didn't happen for a couple of years, or well, I guess 2 years ago it did, but it was the first place where COVID was coming. And as people returned from the conference and came up to the Yukon, everybody was on lockdown as a result. But our mining industry during COVID managed to keep going. And it was quite something. It was not easy for the industry to do. But it was really, and we took it was hard choices for us during that time, but they did a stand-up job, and I just want to acknowledge them as I stand up here publicly, because they did that, they helped our economy to keep going, and they did it safely, and it was really quite something. And it talks a little bit for me about the story of mining. And for the Yukon, we have a huge history of mining, and all of that is great to keep an eye on, but it's not the future of mining. In my perspective, and not in the conversations that I have with industry, and certainly not the conversations I'm having in our communities. I think that the future of mining must be, will be focused on ESG. On environmental, social, and governance. And if it's not going to be our future, that's for sure. And I don't want to speak for the other territories, but I think that this is how we're thinking as a group. And so we want mining, but mining is critical, and we're going to have a conversation about that again. But it's also critical that we get mining right. And what do I mean by that? Well, there's a few things, and one of them is that we work within our governance. So in the Yukon, across the territories, it's a different world of governance. It's not just a provincial government, or in our case, a territorial government. It is that there are self-governing First Nations, and Inuit. And that and even though sometimes for people that want to invest and think about coming to the north, that may be a bit of a worry, it's actually a huge benefit because I think that for all those mines that go forward in the future right now and don't work out with the communities in which they are situated or within First Nations, whether they have self-government agreements or not, I just don't believe that there is a path forward except that we work with our First Nation governments and in the case of NWT and Nunavut, Inuit governments as well. So, and that's one of the things that I think is a key advantage with the territories, is that we have set that all up. We've got that starting relationship. It's not that there isn't many challenges that we have to work through, but it's totally important, and I think we're in the right place. I don't, like, there was, sorry, and I missed the person's name, and I'm just see if oh, here we go. Kenny Ruptash, who said earlier, just a few minutes ago, just before we broke for lunch, in the community, for the community. And there's another phrase that we would say, by the community, or in the north, for the north, by the north. It's a University of the Arctic phrase. And I think it applies to mining as well. What it means is, of course, we welcome you to come in, so long as you know our communities and you make sure that you're helping to build the capacity within our communities. And it will be more sustainable that way, right? When labor is a challenge, if we train up and hire local, it's going to be better for those projects. And I also think the last one I'll talk about, isn't just the social and governance sides, but it's the environmental side. And I want to acknowledge Brandon for his comments from Fireweed, because it's the first time that I heard in this session today talking about climate change. And, when Jeffrey started off with the keynote this morning, he said, well, we're not sure which critical minerals are going to be critical because some things are going to change. But it's clear that we're changing. We are going to shift the energy economy. And as we do it, mining is critical. We will need electric vehicles, batteries, etc. I'm not sure which technology will win out, but I am sure that we'll need mining for it. So I think it's, from our perspective, we want to enter into projects where we're in conversation with the mines right up front about our desire to shift off of fossil fuels and how they can be part of that transition. And I heard Newmont give a great talk about this, and I will also acknowledge that I was on a panel recently talking about it where the mines were coming and talking about net zero by 2050. And this is brand new for me. In my experience, decades as an engineer, I've not had mines leading that conversation. So it's a good space to be in right now. So my main message as we come here, and hi from the Yukon to everybody, and for those who have never been, welcome. It is a wonderful place. I was born in Toronto. I've lived in 7 of the provinces, but the first time I went north, and by the way, it was NWT, I was in awe. I was in Yellowknife and Ray Edso, and that sort of seeded something for me. And then when I made it to the Yukon, I was like, oh, here is where I'm going to live. And so I'm like, there's a sort of a typical story for Yukoners who aren't from the Yukon originally. When you kind of get there, you're like, whoops, and suddenly you're there. And so after 7 provinces, every one which I have loved, including Toronto, which is a great city, it just, where I live now is on the headwaters of the Yukon River, and it is a beautiful place, and I cherish it, and I want mining there. Mining is critical, but it's critical that we get it right. So I welcome you to the Yukon when you come, and please come and say hi. I'm looking forward to the discussions, although I will warn you that a couple of the industry folks have asked me to come for a meeting, so I'm going to have to step out. But I just want to say thank you so much, and it's a pleasure to be here with all of you in Toronto.